On the night of April 11, 1862, 4 days after the Battle of Shiloh, Sergeant Charles Horton picked up a captured Yankee lead pencil and wrote home.
Dear Mother, I've just received that package you sent by John Lavery, and they came in very handy as I only have one pair of stockings left. I got your letter yesterday, but was too tired to answer it. As you will see in the paper, we have been in a fight.
It was a fight that shocked the country, north and south, with names like the Hornet's Nest and the Bloody Pond. Young men, boys really, would see things they never imagined as they started forward into battle.
We started again, and we began to see such sights as turn a person's stomach. Horribly mangled bodies of men and horses mixed up with cannon and war fixings. We left this camp and crossed another. Still worse, when retreating Yankees began to throw apples at us from barrels standing near. It was so long since any of us had eaten an apple that we picked them up and ate them as we ran along. Some began to feel that we were on the battlefield by the balls that came whizzing past us. Soon, we came in sight of the enemy. We made a charge on them, and they fled to the brush and woods nearby, several falling before our guns. They then opened on us with a cannon which killed several of our men.
Horton saw more men die at Shiloh in one battle than all the men killed in the American Revolution and the War of 1812 combined. 24,000 casualties, and the next day would mark only the first year of this war. More than 750,000 would perish before the war between the states was over. Horton would be among them. He died at the home of Eliza Field 2 years later in April of 1864 from wounds suffered at the Battle of Mansfield, Louisiana. In 1867, Eliza Field sent Horton's belongings to his mother in New Orleans, along with a note.
Dear Mrs. Horton, I send by my uncle, Mr. E.H. Crosby, a box Lieutenant Horton used during the war. I thought you would like it simply because it belonged to your dear son and also as a relic of Confederate times. I think such things are heirlooms in a family, that they should be transmitted from one generation to another through all coming time. There were so few things I had to pack, put straw in with them. In a little book, the Masonic Manual, you will find a lock of his hair, which I know from experience you will prize above all things. You will also receive the sword, which although it may be a bad memento of the manner in which he met his death, it will still tell of a brave, daring spirit that never shrank from duty. Face to face, he met the terrible foe. And it was the will of God that he should be struck down by the sword of his enemy in the middle of the terrible conflict. I remain yours respectfully, Eliza C. Field.
Horton's knife and fork engraved for a good boy now rest along with his uniform jacket, pen, diary, and formal portrait in a glass display case in Confederate Memorial Hall, Louisiana's oldest museum. They were brought here more than a century ago by his beloved younger brother, Richard, who Charles so fondly remembered in a letter home from a camp on the Atchafalaya River.
Butte La Rose, Louisiana, February 1863. Dear Mother, it is 8 or 9 months since I have heard from any of you, and I think it is very near as long since you have heard from me, although I have written at every possible opportunity. No doubt you would all like to see me, and I assure you that I would like very much to see you and all my friends again, above all Dickie.
In 1892, young Dickie was a grown man. He reverently carried his brother's wartime relics up the steps of Memorial Hall. While his family never found Lieutenant Horton's grave in Mansfield, they were determined his life, his dedication to duty, and the memory that he fought and died would live on. The few items Horton carried with him into battle are among 5,000 pieces housed in Memorial Hall, one of the country's 2 major collections of Confederate memorabilia. This is the Battle Abbey of the South, where veterans who fought and died are remembered. Here you will find silverware used by Robert E. Lee to Horton's humble knife and fork. By the late 1800s, a generation had passed since Appomattox. Aging Confederate veterans began to join their friends and brothers who had fallen in battle. Those who remained realized the stories of Louisiana veterans, their service and sacrifice would be forever lost without a place for their war relics and their documents. Frank T. Howard, a wealthy New Orleans philanthropist, was determined that would not happen. Howard's father, Charles T. Howard, was a Confederate veteran and founder of the Louisiana State Lottery Company. Frank Howard pledged to build a suitable and handsome annex to the existing Howard Library to honor his father's service and the service of all Louisiana Confederate veterans. Howard said the annex would house
objects which by their visible presence will aid in keeping alive the knowledge of the many occurrences and numerous personages which give such interest and dignity to the history of our own state.
In March of 1888, representatives of Louisiana's Confederate veterans and the Howard Memorial Library gratefully accepted Frank Howard's generous offer. The new hall and museum was designed in the same Romanesque style as the Howard Library and separated by a large green space. In January of 1891, Confederate Memorial Hall was dedicated. The Daily Picayune newspaper described the building as a wonderland.
There's not another building in the city like it, in interior finish and contents. The hall is open and continuous, with several heavy trusses traversing the width of the building. The walls are paneled with cypress. Above are the beams giving an impression of strength and fixity, and above them a lengthwise ridge with glass windows on both sides, affording a plentiful flow of light.
The building was not only a museum, but a meeting place where old soldiers could reminisce, surrounded by their treasures and their memories. Many reunions were festive affairs, with soldiers swapping tales, reunion ribbons, and mementos of the war. Entire families, including soldiers and grandchildren of soldiers, came to the museum. It became one of the city's noted social centers. Aging veterans also served as guides, much like those today at the World War II Museum across the street. Confederate veterans told visitors stories of their war, decisive battles, and of their service in the great defining moment of our nation. 2 years after its dedication, 60,000 visitors would flow through the museum for a single event. They came to pay their respects to the remains of Confederate President Jefferson Davis, who lay in state at Memorial Hall on his way to his permanent resting place in Richmond, Virginia. Davis had died in New Orleans 3.5 years earlier, with a funeral at Gallier Hall and burial in Metairie Cemetery. Verena Davis knew her husband would want to be remembered here, so she sent to the museum 65 crates of priceless personal belongings, treasures of the family and the Confederacy. From a museum wall, Davis's youngest daughter, Winnie, looks down on her father's Bible and the cradle that rocked her, and her father before her to gentle slumber as infants. Verena Davis also included in the gift to Memorial Hall Winnie's carnival finery.
My heart is in New Orleans and Memorial Hall. There I feel I owe my most affectionate gratitude, and to this place I send my dearest relics.
Among them this rare painting, Heroes of the Valley, which once hung in the Confederate White House in Richmond, Virginia. As the collection grew, so did the building. In 1897, a long gallery was added to the eastern side, and an elaborate entrance porch and turret were constructed that gave Memorial Hall the distinctive facade that greets visitors today. The Lady Slocum, a once thunderous 8-inch Columbiad cast at the Tredegar Ironworks in Richmond, guards the entrance. She was named in honor of the wife of the Washington Artillery's idolized captain, Cuthbert Harrison Slocum. She is now a silent reminder of earth-shaking battles and unspeakable carnage. Inside the museum, each artifact tells a personal story. Alexander Dmitri was a private in the 13th Virginia Cavalry who was killed in the war. His mother sent his cavalry boots, a mess kit, and a glove from his sweetheart. From Rene Beauregard, the son of General P.G.T. Beauregard, came his father's elegant uniform. General Braxton Bragg's widow sent her husbands. From the Washington Artillery came the coat of Colonel William Mellor Owen. It appears in amazingly good shape only because an ingenious tailor made the worn one new by taking it apart and sewing it back together, inside out. For safekeeping, families turned over treasured leather-bound diaries, letters, photographs, and artwork, hoping the memories of their loved ones would live on. The basement of the museum became a storage area for tens of thousands of documents, manuscripts, and archival materials, a future treasure trove for historians. Of particular interest is a small ambrotype of Sergeant Joseph Corneille, Company K, 22nd Louisiana Infantry. Some claim drawers and locked cases are found mysteriously opened as he roams restlessly through these halls. But the spirits of all those who fought and died surround us in this great hall, through the battle-scarred flags of long-gone regiments and the swords and guns of individual soldiers. With rare exception, each item has an intimate connection with its owner. Many of the artifacts, uniforms, war logs, and flags bring home the bloody brutality and thunderous chaos of war. The shell jacket of Lieutenant Daniel Merwin of the Madison Light Artillery bears a dark brownish cloud where a bullet tore into his sleeve and claimed his right arm. Sharpshooter John Dolan of Austin's battalion may have feared a similar fate, so he carefully inscribed his jacket's lining with his name and unit, as well as where he fought, lest his fate and his body be lost to his family forever. From Chickamauga, a simple tree trunk sent to the museum captured a moment in the terrible firestorm of iron that ripped across that Georgia battlefield. Also at Chickamauga, the flag of the 2nd Battalion, Hilliard's Alabama Legion. Bullets pierced it 83 times, but 13 brave soldiers kept it aloft. They fell, one after the other, keeping their colors flying as they moved forward into enemy guns. The glorious flags that flew above Confederate regiments and battalions line museum walls. Most bear the scars of battle, since they and the men who carried them were convenient targets for enemy fire. One, the blood-stained flag of the Old Dominion Guard, even served as a litter. When Major Robideau Wheat, commander of the Louisiana Tigers, was seriously wounded at Manassas, he was wrapped in the flag and carried off the battlefield. As blood from his wound flowed onto the colors, Wheat muttered, "I'm not ready to die yet." Wheat survived, only to fall a year later at the Battle of Gaines' Mill. Many of these flags were donated, but some came to the museum in the early 1900s, when the U.S. government returned captured and numbered flags to their home states. Downstairs in the vaults rest dozens more not on display. Many are awaiting restoration through the museum's Adopt a Flag program. The beautiful, lavishly embroidered Louisiana Guard artillery flag was restored in 1993. It bears a hand-painted pelican on one side, while the other proclaims that it was made by the loyal ladies of the city of New Orleans. It was hidden from capture at Appomattox and taken for safekeeping by the unit's captain and given to the museum in the early 1900s. Also on display is the 1st Louisiana Battalion flag, intricately embroidered with the state of Louisiana's Latin motto, "Not for oneself, but for others." Between the fighting and the heartbreak of friends forever lost, camp life was made more bearable by the humble belongings soldiers carried into war. Small, simple treasures the veterans and their families wanted preserved. A pine straw hat, lovingly woven by a sister, a hand-carved wooden chess set, a Bible, a hand-carved drinking cup, a small writing desk, and a sewing kit a soldier's housewife made from the fabric of a sweetheart's dress is a gentle, precious reminder of home. Many of the museum's donations were chronicled by the city's press in the flowery language of the era.
May 30th, 1902. In a pleasant ceremony last night, the famous old piano which the 5th Company Washington Artillery played during the fight at Jackson, Mississippi in 1863 was placed in the care of the Board of Governors of Confederate Memorial Hall.
Soldiers of the 19th Louisiana Infantry removed the piano from a mansion near Jackson before burning the home to keep it out of the hands of Union sharpshooters. The men of New Orleans' famous Washington Artillery hauled the piano to their trenches, where they played it for months.
In a spirit of rollicking fun, not unmixed with defiance for the foe, although scarred and battered, the piano has a fairly good tone still. The boys had an opportunity to play the old piano again and sing the songs they sang when it was in their redoubt.
At the keyboard sat Private Andrew Swain, picking up where he had left off that July day in 1863, playing many of the same songs he played during the war. Veterans of the Washington Artillery joined in the singing as they had done years before. Memorial Hall is committed to protecting these precious historical artifacts, documents, and personal accounts of dangers dared and conquered during a pivotal time in American history. Perhaps Colonel Jack Charleron of the Washington Artillery put it best at Memorial Hall's dedication.
To these sacred and inspiring objects, we should extend the fullest measure of our love and protection. We should guard them with the tender care with which a mother watches over her child. We must see that they are transmitted to our descendants as object lessons, which will inspire them with the reverence of the past and incite them with the determination to emulate the courage, patriotism, and devotion to duty of those who have gone before.
Today, in the quiet town of Mansfield, Louisiana, Lieutenant Charles Horton rests. In 1863, he wrote in his diary these prophetic words.
Got up early and took a bath. Felt much better at breakfast. After breakfast, went downtown with Will. Find Mansfield very much to my taste. It is a perfect paradise of quietness and content. Think I could pass the rest of my days here.
A wish perhaps granted, since Horton lies forgotten somewhere beneath this soil in an unmarked grave. But here, at Memorial Hall, his memory and the memory of all the men who shared his journey live on, always to be remembered.